Hi, I'm Celeste Hudson,
And I am Kevin E. Smith.
and together we're two vets, one mic. And today we have Matt Golben here with us, who is going to share his journey and his story, his veteran transition. Kevin, I'll go ahead and let you lead the way.
Okay, so hi again, Matt. I wanted to start off by talking a little bit about your background, just giving us a brief overview of what you did while you were in the military and then your transition. So it might interject a little bit to ask some questions, but I guess that's how we'll start off.
Sure, absolutely. And feel free to interject frequently as possible. Keep me on track. So I joined actually in 2007, straight out of high school. In the delayed entry program, so I guess it wasn't straight out of high school, but it was a few months afterwards. A big reason actually that I joined was that I wanted to make my way, without having, I didn't really know what I wanted to do straight out of high school. And I knew that if I was going to go to college, then I was probably going to end up in debt. Well, I don't really want to. I feel like if I join the military, I can see the world, I can kind of get an experience, and I can be part of a community that I know is very pervasive and just sort of get experience. So those were some of the reasons that I joined. And I joined as an aviation electronics technician. Thought about going special operations, but I also ultimately realized that wasn't for me. And I knew that if my resolve wasn't 100%, then I wasn't going to be successful. And during my military career, I served in 3 deployments. 2 were on aircraft carriers, CVN-71 and CVN-77, along with a stint in the Army as an individual augmentee during detention facility operations in Afghanistan in 2010. So I like to think I filled my military time with as much good stuff as I possibly could. But I ultimately left. I was actually in my last deployment, and I extended for that last deployment about 3 months. But I felt that there was something more for me. There was something more. I didn't want to make my life out of the military. And I realized that, there's people have completely different stories, but that's mine.
So you felt like time for your enlistment was enough for you. And so what did you decide to do when you got out?
Well, I decided to travel for a bit. So spent about 6 months traveling around North America. And then as I was traveling, I kind of thought about, well, I have this GI Bill. I want to make the most of that. And what is it that I'm really interested in? And at that time, I was really interested in consciousness and by proxy, neuroscience. So I thought I'll go in, I'll get an education in neuroscience. So so I basically came back, found some work in hydrogen storage technology as well. While I was doing I went to community college first so I could pay off my prerequisites without having to dip into my GI Bill, and then to University of Massachusetts and studied neuropsychology there. So I've got my undergraduate degree. Do you want me to continue or?
Now, I am very curious about consciousness as a field or a choice. I'm like, this has piqued my interest. So please tell me more about.
Elaborate.
Yes, please, about consciousness.
Yeah, there's so many things to say. It's a sort of infinite expanse. The one thing that I think was really compelling was that famous neuroscientist Roger Sperry said, there are forces within forces as in no other cubic half foot in the universe that we know of. He was referencing the brain. He wrote that in a seminal paper. And that really resonated with me. And that I kind of reasoned that there was this collinearity of consciousness with complexity. And that's kind of one of the things that we see in regards to the brain and, behavior with the complex behavior of organisms. So we kind of have this, I think, collective chauvinistic attitude about humans being the pinnacle of, evolution as we know it. And obviously that's pretty limited, but it's also based in what we are capable of recognizing in our environment. And so I think that, when we study the brain, we are studying consciousness. We are studying just the emergent complexity of the universe. And I think that ultimately we are still on a trajectory of biomimicry in our relationship to artificial intelligence, that we're seeking to ultimately sort of emulate that behavior that we recognize in ourselves, or the consciousness that we recognize in ourselves. Because that's the hard problem of consciousness, right? Is the quality of why do we have subjective experience at all? And we're kind of I think oftentimes sort of projecting that anthropomorphologically onto the universe.
So you said you went to school for neuroscience or neuro?
Yeah, well, it was kind of an interesting experience because I was told that there was a strong neuroscience program, and then I got in and then realized that wasn't really the case. And I found out about this build your own degree program. So I tried to do that in studying consciousness, but they didn't put me into the introductory class, and I was only there for 2 years. So I actually ended up, because I thought that I had more flexibility in building my own course, that I took a bunch of classes that really didn't apply to the core curriculum: anatomy and physiology and differential equations and informatics. And so then I had the default to a degree of neuroscience, psychology with an emphasis in neuroscience.
And you finished that degree?
Absolutely, yes.
So it's interesting because now you're with Verizon, and those two don't even go together. Kind of like my degree too. Like I think Ebony has an MBA, I have an MHA. My background was dental hygiene, and I'm in finance. MBA you can use, right? MBA you can use anywhere, but she's not using it the way she wants to. So tell me about why you shifted toward Verizon, or how you got into Verizon.
It's been a journey. So I guess what really started was I was working in research and development of hydrogen storage technology with applications as heat engines and heat pumps. And long story short, we were working on a prototype, was involved in analyzing some data. And because of the sort of walk of the cooling environment, I realized that there was a bottleneck in really deriving useful data or use from data. And so I was like, well, this seems like there is vacuum here, or a bottleneck, like I said, in research and development. So I thought, well, I should learn how to do this. And so I found out about data science and the vet tech program. And so I joined and got certified as a data scientist. However, this is 2020, and also found out that really it's a very difficult field to get into. At least for me, tech is a very difficult field. I was unsuccessful in finding a job in that immediate environment, worked in construction for a bit. I was eligible for that tech program again, so I went back, I got certified as a full stack developer, and then found work, but also wasn't completely fulfilled, and I had a lot to learn. And so I just sort of, gathered a bunch of certifications, found out about the Career Forward Fellowship, and then got my Google Career Certificate. And it was honestly actually a long protracted journey, because I applied to a few positions at Verizon, interviewed for them, and apparently got kind of rough feedback that I was overqualified.
Well, yeah, that's why I was like, your whole journey that you're telling me, your story, it sounds like you're overqualified, right? And that always hinders people. It's like, man, you got the qualities, but I don't know if they don't want to pay you what you're really worth, or what. It's so confusing.
And it's very difficult because you're underqualified. Everyone wants experience, and it's kind of like a chicken and egg problem. You can't really get experience if you can't get a job.
Right.
So and I think and a lot of times, especially with data science, things of that nature, you really need to know what you're doing, because there's oftentimes not many people who can check your work and ensure that you're doing it correctly. And comparatively, the entry-level jobs are pretty much saturated. It's a lot of people, I think there's a lot of big fish out there who gobble up the jobs before it really trickles down to people to get a start, although the landscape is potentially changing quite a bit. But yeah, after a few iterations, found out about a few openings at Verizon, and I actually didn't even think, I'm currently in a career for the military fellowship at Verizon for a senior data scientist, senior data engineer, sorry. And to be honest, like, I don't have a background in data engineering, but I looked at the description, the job description. I think I can vaguely do this, like, I don't think I'm going to get this job because I really don't have the credentials for this or the experience for this, but I think I can do the responsibilities, perform the responsibilities. And so I applied for that one as well as a few others, and got this fellowship.
That's awesome. Now, Kevin, can you pause the recording real quick? You're able to pause it. Only because I know somebody's going to fix this. My computer is about to die.
Oh, so Matt, I want to go back a little bit in your story to when you first got out, because this how prepared we are differs greatly. I got out in 2020, and even the resources I knew about then, which is really just TAPS, and I think Higher Heroes is vastly different from what the resources that I heard about now. So let's go back a little bit to when you first got out. Specifically, did you go to TAPS, and did you think it was useful? And two, were you prepared to get out?
Wow. Yeah, it's a lot to go into for sure. And I had a similar experience, which was I did 10 taps, and I think young and dumb did not really consider, even really know what I wanted to do. So I was just kind of waiting to get out. It's like, I recommend it. There's a lot. If I knew then what I know now, things would be a lot different. But comparatively, like you said, a lot of the programs did not exist when I got in 2012, which has just sort of come across piecemeal as I've investigated and learned more. One thing I definitely want to impart before I talk about anything else is, if you have a security clearance, keep that active. Like, that is huge. That can be a job in itself. I did not know that until I started, like a decade later. I'm like, oh, wait a second. That security clearance that I had is really, could have been really helpful. Like I've said, the things that I knew about was the GI Bill, which, I used. I still have, I think, like 8 months left, and I found out about the VAC program. Well, as a pilot program, but I think that that's going to be ending this year. I don't know if that will be continued, but definitely something to look into. The government will pay for these boot camps, these technology boot camps, which can be really helpful. Another thing I really want to point out is that you can be reimbursed by the VA for certifications, and you just have to submit a few things on Quick Submit, and you have to fill out a form, asking for reimbursement.
Do you have to be 100% disabled? Does it matter about your disability rating with the VA?
That's a great question. I think you don't need to be disabled. Because I'm not disabled, but I think you might need 100% coverage, honorably discharged.
Oh yeah.
Does that answer your question? Okay.
Because I know some education programs, like the vocational rehab, you have to be 100% to qualify for that, to try to go to school. Okay. With the VA paying for it, if you just have like maybe a month or so of your GI Bill left, something like that. But the certifications was a new thing I didn't know about. So another good resource. Thank you.
Yeah, didn't know about that either. Right.
Yeah, if it's I think nationally accredited, CompTIA has a slew of really standard industry certifications. So you can, so long as you upfront the cost of taking the exam, then you can get reimbursed. That I've noticed a little caution. I've noticed that the feedback or the time it takes, it can vary. It can be like 2 weeks to a month and a half. Like, you have to kind of sometimes call them up and make sure that they do it. But you will get paid back, so really, that's really helpful. And I don't think, I certainly wouldn't be here if I didn't have the resources available through. So definitely make as much use of them as possible.
So what are some of the challenges, if any, right, did you experience when you got out? In between the time you got out and you started to look for different employment, what were some of the challenges that you had?
Using the GI Bill was really helpful. But I think it can be difficult for anyone just finding the autonomy to make their own way, in life. I think sometimes you really need to get clear and also be practical and pragmatic in what that vision looks like. I think that, for example, getting a degree in neuropsychology, I thought was really cool at the time and something I wanted to study and fun, but in retrospect, was not a very pragmatic approach. I would definitely go back and have studied just mathematics or software engineering or computer science, etc. If you're going into tech, that is, of course. I would definitely, I think I may have put the cart before the horse in that I should have done something that was more applicable and I could get a job in easier, because that would have definitely helped set the foundation for.
Did it take you a while to kind of, well, after you realized the neuroscience degree, and what can you do with that degree? When I think psychology, I automatically think like, I think it's industrial organizational psychology or like therapist or professor. What are the career paths for the neuroscience degree?
You are absolutely correct. I think all of those are possible, but a lot of them require either a more advanced degree, going into research as a career. Honestly, I don't know why that didn't exactly appeal to me, because in a way it does. I love all of those options, but it wasn't until I really started programming that I kind of got like the direct feedback that I really enjoyed, because you get to, when you're programming, it can be incredibly frustrating, don't get me wrong, but if you get past that, there's kind of this fun. It's really fun. You know, you get to solve puzzles all day. You know, you get to work on things, and you kind of get that immediate feedback of, oh, this is working. You know, this thing is, I fixed this bug, or, you know, I have this program, and I got to build it. You know, and it's functional. Whereas I think that in research, sometimes there can be this protracted state where you don't get that kind of feedback. So, I mean, I think that I could have gone personally into graduate school, but it didn't really appeal to me, at least in a compelling way.
It's gratification seeing what you've done. It reminds me of when we were cleaning teeth. You know, you go and you clean and you get the calculus off, and it's like, oh, I did that.
Right.
It's coming off. Yeah, that's all I can, compare it to. Like, I know what you're talking about.
For sure.
When you see something that you've done and you fixed.
Exactly. No, and that's so important, you know, especially in the service. I think there is a lot of that immediate feedback, that immediate gratification, working on something, you know, working on jets and seeing them take off. And it's kind of hardwired into our brains in a lot of ways. So got to find something that gives you the gratification that's not just a paycheck, you know, or being in the service and knowing that everything that you're doing is helping people.
Now, what I was about to ask was, what was the turning point for you? I know now you're with, you know, when did you say, okay, I kind of want to solidify my path in the tech world or get into STEM? When was that kind of that turning point after you got out? I'm on my 4th job, by the way, at post-military. So I know we can go through different things to figure out what we actually like. But what was that turning point like where you was like, okay, this is what I want to do?
Well, first of all, congratulations on your 4th job.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, no, changing careers, changing jobs, you know, that's a big deal. Absolutely. Kudos to you and your evolution. I think it was kind of organic for me in that I followed my interests. Like I said, it was a bit haphazard in that first just attracted to sort of amorphous, ambiguous concepts of consciousness and what that really means philosophically. And that translated more into the finer details of what are the mechanisms by which the physical mechanisms by which these phenomena occur. And I think that's, again, that kind of like, you know, transition. It's also very possible that I'm just a product of the times. You know, I like to think that these interests were auto-generated, but it also has pretty much linearly corresponded to what's going on in the worlds and our developing understanding of, I think the 90s was the start of the imperative to totally map the brain and understand it. And then artificial intelligence, you know, has arisen for different reasons, you know, practical applications, but there is this unifying factor of really what does this mean for understanding ourselves as humans.
Now, I don't want to get off on a bunny trail, but I'm very curious about your thoughts on artificial intelligence as far as the moral aspect of it goes. Are we trusting artificial intelligence to make better decisions than we have made as human beings? And who gets to say what is a better decision, right? Who gets to say who's morally superior in some of these questions? And I don't know how far we're going to go into how we integrate it into everyday life, but I do have some concerns personally about the moral aspect and who gets to decide what's a better decision. What are your thoughts on that?
It's like the perfect person to ask.
I'm sweating. No, those are huge questions. And I think that I'm definitely not qualified to fully answer them, but my
Mm-hmm.
personal thoughts are that when you're dealing with complexity, the name of the game is simplicity. You strive to balance it, and comparatively, the human brain is fraught with cognitive biases. Constantly is trying to simplify information into something that is digestible and usable, and that creates, that can lead to problems down the road. And so again, that's the ethical concern, right? Is how do we program something to be better than ourselves, to act with more integrity than we can ostensibly kind of generate? And it's kind of difficult to honestly do that, because if you are creating the parameters that you want to find out, you have an intention, right? You're like, I want to increase our metrics. I want to determine the KPIs and really apply them so that we have better return. Like, that's what is that really going to, when you think about the low hanging fruit versus the high hanging fruit, that's a general trend though, is that you have to take the low hanging fruit first, and or at least that's the imperative in a lot of ways. And so I think that we're just on that scale. We're on that trajectory. Once it started, there's really no way that we can turn around or go back, but we're going to make mistakes along the way, for sure. And just hopefully none of those mistakes eradicate humanity.
I know, and I think that's the fear, right? Like, how far are we going with this?
I'm not too scared right now. You know why? Because it's helping me in my everyday life. I use we have Gen AI that it's called Gen AI for our J&J work, and I use it to say I want to write an email to a customer that I'm working with, and I want them to pay me the money they owe, and kind of let them know it's serious, but in a professional manner. So I type that in there, make this email sound professional, and the stuff it sounds just amazing. I use it every day, all day, just to help me with emails, or if I'm trying to write a referral for somebody that I've talked to, make this referral for somebody that has their bachelor's degree, they have a background in this, and this, and it pumps out this beautiful referral for me. So I like it in that aspect, and I use it for that. It really does help my work go smoothly throughout the day. And now I wasn't too great at tailoring resumes, but now it can help me tailor my resume. You can take a whole job description plus your couple of work experience. Hey, put these together, tailor it so I can, match it to this job. So I love it. I think the early starts of what we're using it for is great. Now I know there's probably some other things we're doing that we don't know about.
Right. I think that's what concerns me, the more sinister side of it,
Like the, Terminator kind of stuff, but that's all everyone ever thinks of.
Right.
I think it's great.
Oh, like you're right. Like resume, I helped write some resumes. I was like, this is outstanding. Like it saved me tons of time. But I think I watched a documentary on 60 Minutes that scared the heck out of me when it came they talked about the guy that like helped create it, and I'm like, wow. And stay with me, because I got another question about this, and it's gonna all come together. First is community, right? So community always kind of comes up in these conversations with veterans. Like, how did that impact you leaving your military community? I think some people are more prepared for that than others. I think a lot of us didn't settle down where we got out at. Either we settled down where we got out at, or it's not back home. It just differs. So how has community affected you once you got out?
Great question. I think the military, correct me if I'm wrong, but it's pretty unique in just how close you become with your coworkers. Sleeping right on top of them, in a like 3-foot space, and they're your enemies or your friends or your, just everything. You can't escape them when you're deployed, especially. So you can't escape community, I think, when you're in the service. Whereas out of it, then you can find yourself at a lot of times pretty isolated, and isolation is a killer in a lot of ways. I think, honestly, my personal approach is that community is everywhere. We just oftentimes are our biggest obstacle to it. So if you feel isolated, if you feel you don't have the support structure, you need to reach out. You need to really take that initiative to get involved with people. And because I think the world ultimately, I think in that very same vein is hurting. I think people need more connection, and I think that we're primed for it. We have so many technology, we have so many capabilities, and we just need to use them correctly. And I think that is, getting together, being more transparent, being more curious, creating an environment of fun, creating an environment of engagement. I think that it really is it's everywhere. We just have to embrace it. So I don't think that, but back to that point, I think it can be difficult, very difficult internally to make that transition. But that's where the work is, I think, for each individual, is obviously always the man in the mirror. Like, how do you really start with yourself, and then show up more integrated, more fully for the world at large.
The point I was going to connect there was community. It's a lack of community with veterans. Our suicide rate is much higher than the national average. I think community has a big part in that. Also, veterans are, I think, impacted by mental health concerns or conditions, rather, at a higher rate too. Do you think there's any connection between the consciousness piece and the mental health piece when it comes to veterans? Like, because there's a lot of alternative treatments out here now, right? People are doing things that they had not done for things like PTSD and stuff like that. Do you think it's a connection there at all, based on what you know about consciousness and the mind and the brain and neuroscience?
Yeah, there's so much to get into. And I think the only real common denominator in all of it is the individual. One person's experience is not another person's experience, and one person's motivation is not another person's motivation. And, I'm going to be completely transparent and say that I have been suicidal myself. Especially, I think what's been difficult for me, actually, this whole tech transition has been incredibly difficult. And that's something I would really like to drive home, is that the only thing that's really necessary to entertain suicide is the perception that life is not worth living. And if you feel your obstacles are too great for you to surmount them, then that becomes very demoralizing, incredibly demoralizing. In all honesty, this position that I'm getting with Verizon is a godsend. It's something that I feel was very, very hard won. And that's my personal story, is that's what I have dealt with. I've had many great people in my life in a more communal sense who I have connected with, and I've been able to develop great communities that I felt were very nurturing and kind of were able to set a good container for my personal development. But like I said, each individual has their own difficulties. And I do believe that there are a lot of support structures for you. Maybe it's a person, maybe it's a program, maybe it's a belief, but it's like there's no real panacea except I guess love, but but there, for the medicine is the problem that you're experiencing. So I would encourage everyone to just seek that out, whatever your ailment is. But I also think you're kind of touching upon one thing, which I would like to just throw a little shout out, which is, there are more psychopharmaceutical approaches, especially integrating new hallucinogenic therapies. And, I think that's honestly a great thing. I think that's, again, you're talking about the individual and their individual approach. And there are a lot of studies have been done on synaptic plasticity and how important spirituality is. And I think that the core foundation of that spirituality is your personal subjective experience. No one can ever really emulate that for you. No one can really distill your truth except yourself. I think that all of that is, again, the kernel from which you start.
No, that's good. And thank you for sharing that. It is, people are doing different things, and I kind of alluded to it, but sometimes I act like I'm still in the military. But, stuff like, people are doing like ayahuasca or other different things to tap into those deep areas and to try to heal. And I think they were once so taboo, and now I think the masses have accepted it. And sometimes I wonder, has that trickled over to the veteran community? Just exposure. We've just said no to any of that for so long too. I just wonder, like, when we get out, like how open we are to anything that may help, that might not be accepted by the masses yet. So So that's why I asked that question.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. And I love, I find it so humorous just how disparate our cultural approach to the drugs are. Like alcohol's okay. Mushrooms, like or LSD. If you look at it, there's just such a high rate of incidence of violence with alcohol and mushrooms. Psychedelic mushrooms, like the lowest incident rate of any known drug, as far as I have read. So exactly, yeah. What and comparatively, what do people walk away with? A hangover versus a very transformative experience that has been empowering to their spirituality and their identity and their well-being. Like, how can you logically make an argument against that? I think there's a great movement occurring in society where people are embracing these things, embracing a more adaptive approach through the hallucinogenics. I mean, don't get me wrong, like, be careful. There's always potential for abuse.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah,
For sure.
you don't want to abuse anything. I mean, everything in moderation. But I personally, do believe that there is a lot of healing to be done through the use of therapies, as you suggested.
No, for sure. I think I covered a lot. Celeste, did you have anything else?
Did. I know you talked about you had suicidal ideations at a point, and when was that? When did that occur? What was going on in your life? Was it, if you feel like sharing, was it after you got out? Is it, when you were in this space trying to figure out what am I going to do, trying to get a job, or?
I guess I'll just be as transparent as possible, which is I kind of actually honestly have struggled with suicidal ideation my whole life. A lot of with my development, and so it's been a repeated pattern. Honestly, I think that traveling has saved my life numerous times. And just kind of like, I don't know what to do. I don't know how I'm gonna basically honestly survive this, but there are things I haven't tried, so I'm gonna try those things. And I think that that kind of mentality can be very important. When you feel like you have nothing left to lose, it's important to really challenge your assumptions and challenge challenge your limitations, and really kind of use that as an opportunity to engage more and to get more involved. And because there's talking about neuroscience, neuropsychology, there's one of the main takeaways that if I could impart a mini lesson to you, or anyone, if you're not already familiar, is the difference between the default mode network and the task positive network. So these are the two major connectomes, and a connectome is a white matter tract that connects different parts of the brain. The default mode network has been shown to be primarily, the prefrontal medial cortex, along with the hippocampus area, and your occipital lobe, along with some temporal lobe tracts. And what has been shown is that this default mode network is how we consolidate information. So it's kind of like, once we've ingested something, how are we really internalizing it, right? And so that involves how we're actively thinking about it, involves how we're perceiving it because there's a feedback mechanism where you think about your third eye. It is in a lot of ways the projections of actually your occipital lobe, right? Because it's not, your brain is never really dormant. It's always about the connections between different areas of the brain that are active. But the problem is that with that default mode network, we can start creating what are called automated negative thoughts, and we begin to ruminate, and that's the stimuli that we have entertained, right? How are we internalizing it? Are we internalizing it positively or internalizing it negatively? And I think a lot of times that can be a feedback loop where the negative gets reinforced. So the way you break that is you engage in a task positive network, which has been shown to take different parts of the brain, more of your executive function, aspects of engagement, and you break that thought pattern and you inject a different modality of thinking. So it's kind of like, time flies when you're having fun. Like, it's important to go out and do things, get involved, because there is a feedback mechanism that it reinforces, you being more engaged, having more things to do, and that can be life-saving. So that would be my advice. And comparatively, if I can monotone like another diatribe, I think that it's important. So there's, studies that have been done on addiction, right? And one of my favorite studies was that they had two sets of rats. One set of rat was put into a very sterile, base environment. Another set of rats were put into a very enriched environment where they had access to other rats and they could like climb things and little puzzles and all that stuff. And they were both given access to heroin, right? Sort of a veritable heroin. And the ones in the non-enriched environment kept going back to the heroin, right? And the ones in the enriched environment, even though they had access to the heroin, didn't even touch it after they'd already been exposed to it. And I think that's the important thing, right? Is the human brain desires, and I think it's no coincidence. It's not, this is a very well recognized phenomenon throughout the universe. When you think about the evolution of replication, we, in a lot of ways, are biologically programmed to explore. And so when you do that, you seek out the things that are available to you. And so if you have a more enriched environment, if you allow yourself that engagement, I think that it speaks to us on a very core level that we are enriched, or we derive gratitude from it.
I'm thinking of while he's talking, I'm thinking of and you could probably don't have to record this for later.
Oh, yeah. Wait. You want to wrap up?
Yeah, let's close it up.
And then we can talk about that. No, Matt, it was a pleasure talking to you. I think you have a great story. I'm very intrigued, actually, by I just don't meet many people that talk about the consciousness and neuroscience. You have so smart, right? Like, I can tell. So I think you have a lot to offer other veterans too. So just consider that as you go forth in your journey, and thank you. This is the start of it. If you haven't already been sharing and connecting, and I think some people will definitely be blessed by what you shared today. Any last thoughts, Celeste?
No, I just have some thoughts offline.
All right. See you next time.
Great meeting you and talking with you, Matt. Thank you.
Thank you both so much.